بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Dear students, in this presentation I will be presenting the types of selection test, or continue to explaining the types of selection tests. In the previous meeting or presentation we explained about the types of selection tests, and we talked about many types we can use in selecting process. These types such as cognitive abilities and tests of physical abilities, measuring the personality abilities and personality effectiveness, testing the interest of inventories and achievement tests. Today we will continue and proceed by explaining more types of tests. The first type we will explain about situational judgment tests. In the situational judgment tests, the employees or the applicant we put the applicant in the same situation as the real work life. The personal test designed to assess the applicant's judgment regarding a situation encountered in the workplace. So in this type we put the applicant in real life of workplace situation, and we need to assess how the applicant will deal or handle with this situation, or what decision the applicant will take to solve some problems, or to face some daily situations he may face in his real job. So this is an example. Please indicate how you would respond to each of the following situation. So we give the applicant some situations and how he will deal with these situations, and the supervisor or the assessor can rate the answer and how the candidate will deal with this situation. Situational judgment tests are effective and widely used. Okay, the other type is management assessment centers. In a management assessment center, management candidates take tests and make decisions in simulated situations, while trained assessors grade their performance. The center may be a conference room, but often it is a room with a one-way mirror for unobtrusive observation. Examples: there are 3 examples for this type of tests, which is management assessment centers. The in-basket and the leader group discussion and individual presentations. The in-basket, here the candidate faces an accumulation of report, memos, notes, or incoming phone calls, letters, and other materials. The candidate takes appropriate action on each of these materials. Okay? the candidate face accumulation of reports, memos, notes, or coming phone calls, letters, and other materials, and the assessor need to know how the candidate will take action for each materials. And the leadership group discussion, not leadership, a leaderless group discussion. A leaderless group receives a discussion question and must arrive at a group decision. The raters then evaluate each group members. So here in this kind, we grouped the candidates in several groups, and there is no group leader, and give them a discussion question that must arrive to a group decision. The rater or assessor or the person, the employer, then evaluate each group members' interpersonal skills, acceptance by group, leadership ability, and individual influence. Individual presentation, a participant's communication skills. This is in this form we need to test or to evaluate the communication skills and other skills. Okay, employers use assessment centers for selection, promotion, and development. Supervisor recommendations usually play a big role in choosing participants. Line managers usually act as assessor. Line managers usually act as assessors and typically arrive their rating through consensus. Clear? I think it's clear. So the last type of selection tests is computerized multimedia candidate assessment tools. Employers increasingly use computerized multimedia candidate assessment tools. Thus, development dimensions international developed a multimedia skill test that Ford Motor Company uses for hiring assembly workers. They use this test to hire assembly workers. The company can test everything in this test or this type. The employer can test everything from how people tighten the bolt to whether they followed a certain procedure correctly, to use weight sensitive mat on the floor. Everything the employer assesses in this type of test, and it depends on the type of the job that we need to hire for. Okay, that's all for the selection tests or the types of tests. We explored more about many types of selection. Now let's move on to the interview or interviewing candidates. Remember, in the first lecture or the first meeting in this chapter, we explained or we informed that there are 3 techniques for selection: the selection tests and interviews, and the observation or background investigation. Background investigation. Now in this part we talk about the interview of candidates. While not all employers use tests. Not all employers use tests. It would be very unusual for a manager not to interview a prospective employee. If we don't use tests, we need to make an interview, or we can use both test and interview. An interview is a procedure designed to select information from a person, oral responses to oral inquiries. A selection interview is a selection procedure designed to predict future job performance on the basis of applicants' oral responses or oral inquiries. There are many types of interviews. As you may know from your own experience, there are several ways to conduct selection interview. Structure. First, interviews may vary in the degree to which the interviewer structure or standardize the interview. There is a structure and unstructured interview. Structured and unstructured interview. In unstructured interviews, the interviewer asks questions as they come to mind, generally with no set format. So in structured interview, the questions already formatted, or there is a set of questions that's already structured. And in unstructured interview, the interviewer asks questions as they come to mind, generally with no set format. In more structured or directive interviews, the questions and perhaps even acceptable answers are specified in advance, and the answers may be rated for appropriateness. Okay? Structured and unstructured interview. Types of questions. Interviewers also ask different types of questions. There are different types of questions: situational, behavioral, and knowledge and background questions. Okay. Situational questions focus on the candidate's ability to explain what his or her behavior would be in a given situation. An example: how would you react to a subordinate coming to work late 3 days in a row? This is an example to situational questions. The types of questions are 3 types: situational, behavioral, and knowledge and experience questions. In the behavioral questions, you ask interviewees how they behaved in the past in some situations. For example, did you ever have a situation in which a subordinate come in late? If so, how did you handle the situation? Okay? So, in situational questions, how would you react to subordinate coming to work late 3 days in a row? In behavioral questions, we ask the interviewees how they behave in the past. So, an example: did you ever have a situation in which a subordinate came in late? If so, how did you handle this situation? Okay. Knowledge and background questions. Job-related knowledge and experience, as in what math courses did you take in college? What math courses did you take in college? This is to assess the background, academic background, and the knowledge that the candidate has. Now, how to administer the interview? How we administer the interview, or how we make the interview, how we interview the candidates. There are many ways to make the interview. Managers can also administer the interview in several ways. The one-on-one interview. One-on-one interview is familiar. Two people meet alone and one interviews the other. The interviewer and the interviewee. One-on-one. The interviewer on one side and the interview on other side. There is one type. In a subsequent or sequential interview, several people interview the applicant in sequence before a selection decision is made. Not one-on-one, sequential. Sequential means many interviewers, but separately. Several interviewers separately interview the employer. Okay. In panel interview, the candidate is interviewed simultaneously by a group or a panel as a committee of interviewers rather than sequentially. Okay, so here are three types: one-on-one, sequential, or panel. The other type is video or phone. Video or phone interview. Phone interviews can be more accurate than face-to-face ones for judging things like interpersonal skills. So, video or phone can be more accurate. Why? Why video or phone can be more accurate than face-to-face? Because neither side need worry about things like clothing or handshakes. The phone interview may let both participants focus more on substantive answers. Okay? So the phone or video interview can be more accurate than face-to-face interview because neither side need worry about things like clothing or handshakes. Okay. Let's go to how useful are interviews. How useful are interviews? While most employers use interviews, the statistical evidence regarding their validity is mixed. The key is that the interview's usefulness depends on how you conduct the interview itself. In summary, for predicting job performance, situational interviews yield higher validity than behavioral interviews. For predicting job performance, situational interviews yield higher validity than behavioral. This is for what? For the predicting job performance. Structured interviews, regardless of content, are more valid and reliable than unstructured interviews. Structured are more valid and reliable than unstructured interviews for predicting job performance. One-on-one interviews tend to be more valid than panel interview. One-to-one interview or one-on-one more valid than panel interviews. In summary, structured situational interviews in which you ask candidate what they would do in a particular situation, conducted one-on-one, seem to be the most useful for predicting job performance. Okay, now let's move on to learning objective 3. Explain the factors and problems that can undermine an interview's usefulness and the techniques for eliminating them. How to avoid common interview mistakes. How to avoid common interview mistakes. Most people think they are better interviewers than they really are. Actually, several common interviewing mistakes often undermine an interview's usefulness. Snap judgments. Interviewers tend to jump to conclusion, make snap judgment about candidates during the first few minutes of the interview. In fact, this often occurs before the interview begins, based on test scores or reason. Snap judgments means بمعنى يعني نعطي حكم مسبق من الوهلة الأولى إلى هذا الكانديديت في بداية الانترفيو المقابلة. هذا بناء على إيش؟ على التست سكورز، على الدرجات اللي حصلها في التست، أو الريسيومز اللي هو السي في. بنعطي حكم مسبق، وهذا خطأ يجب أن نتفاداه. النيجاتيف emphasis jumping، هذا another mistake. النيجاتيف emphasis jumping to conclusions is especially troublesome given free interviewing facts. Interviews are often mostly search for negative information. بعض انه في الانترفيو نبحث فقط عن المعلومات السلبية. Interviewers tend to be more influenced by unfavorable than favorable information. يعني بعض المقابلين يعمد إلى التأثر بالunfavorable than favorable information، يعني المعلومات الغير مفضلة، أو ينظر إلى اتجاه السلبي ويترك الاتجاه الإيجابي. Interviewers' impressions are more likely to change from favorable to unfavorable than from unfavorable to favorable. يعني الانطباع لدى المقابلين more likely to change دائما، يعني يتغير من favorable to unfavorable than from unfavorable to favorable. As an interviewee, remember that زي الأشخاص اللي هو الcandidates المتقابلين، remember that you only have one chance to make a good first impression. The first impression is very important. As an interviewer, the implication is keep an open mind and consciously guard against unwarranted negative impressions. Okay, this is for an interviewee and for an interviewer. Not knowing the job. Another mistake is that some interviewer who don't really know the job entail or what sort of candidate is best suited for it. Usually enter the interview which incorrect stereotypes about the ideal applicant. This is a big mistake when the interviewer don't know what the job entails or what the job description, what the job specification we need, and what sort of candidate is best. Pressure to hire. Another mistake is being under pressure to hire undermines interview validity. When the company or the employer is pressured to hire some person or some sort of employees. Candidate order or contrast order. Candidate order or constraint order error or constraint error, sorry, means that the order in which you see applicants affects how you rate them. Means the employer is being affected by the opinion of the applicant. And let's stop in this section, and I will continue in the next part of this presentation.